All right, so we are here doing another tier list with our good friend Solix Cross. We got all the mega chips and giga chips, and we were thinking of starting with gigas first, right? Is that right, Sol?
Yes, that's right.
All right, so I guess starting off, it looks like Red Hand's base, which I'm pretty sure is the Gregar version of base. And actually, before we do that, let's pull up the exact same, metrics we did for last time. So S is going to be like, I guess just insanely good, hard not to run. I guess I don't know how to define that. A would be like, very, very good. B would be like maybe situationally good. C would be like mid. and I guess F would be just bad. Like don't do it. Does that all sound good to you, Sol? I don't know if you're able to see this on the Twitch side. Okay, cool. So starting off with Red Hand's base, that is the Gregar version of base. That's the one that rakes the entire back 3x3 area for I believe 480 damage. I believe it's 8 shots, 60 each. I could be mistaken about that. How do you feel about Red Hand's base?
So I think base default is very interesting. He only hits on the 3x3 Greg of your opponent's side of the field. So if your opponent uses an area grab or panel grab and they are in that space, you cannot damage them with this Giga. Also, uniquely, if your opponent has a hole and they have air shoes, they can stand on that hole and completely avoid all of the damage from this Giga as well. So those are the two ways to counterplay around this chip.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, it's crazy to think that, like, I guess it just hits the panel itself. Like, the fact that a hole would actually, like, you wouldn't think that because you think that base is, like, shooting down from above, but I guess
exactly.
Yeah, and holes aren't like they're pretty common.
They're
I would
very
say
common.
It's unfortunate. And then the other thing with base is you're in Gregar, so that means you're not running Kernel Force. And if you're in patch cards, you're not running Gregar. You know what I mean? So it's like it's tricky. I don't really know how to evaluate base. I don't like him, to be honest with you.
There's
I don't know
one more thing that actually makes him kind of undesirable, right?
Okay.
And he does have a chance to not finish your opponent off, right? Okay, so here's the logic.
Okay.
So it does 480 damage. If your opponent has 410 or less HP, it should be a straight Oko through undershirt, right? Well, no. What ends up happening is base has a chance to hit 7 times, and he also has a chance to hit only 6 times.
Really? So he's not even a guaranteed 480?
He's not a guaranteed 8 at all. But the chance of hitting that rare 6 is so astronomically low that it might as well not be a factor.
But how about 7?
The 7 is rare, but does happen.
Like 10%? Like what are the odds?
It's like a 10% to not hit 8 times. Yeah.
Jeez.
So he does have a lot of things going against him.
Yeah, Moscow in the chat saying 5%. Yikes. That's like a critical hit.
Yeah, 5%. That's what it was. 5%. It's a low chance. So a low chance to get 7 hits and not 8. So it's not that bad. I mean, think of it in terms of like Pokemon. 95% accuracy is really good for a move, and that's pretty safe for you, right?
Yeah.
Whereas anything lower than that is usually like questionable.
Yeah.
What he has going for him, though, is double point base does an obscene amount of damage. Attack plus 30 on base also does an obscene amount of damage because it's an 8-hitting, multi-hitting chip, right?
Yeah.
So if you add 60 to that, it's doubling the damage to 120 times 8. So it's a lot of damage on those chips.
And it's cool to think, I mean, this is a pretty fringe build. This would not be a very likely build. But if you did have, like, Giga Folder 1, you like those chips, like, at least attack 30 goes really well with Kernel Force 2, so it's like you could have a little like a little double dipping synergy with the Giga chip if you were to run them both. Once again, not very likely because your Navi custom Gregar is very limited. With you're either running air shoes or you've got like trying to tank up, so it's not likely you can squeeze in a Giga Folder 1. And if you could in patch cards, you're probably running Gregar, but but even so, that's kind of interesting.
So
now what's your overall? Yeah, what's your overall take?
As much as I'm a huge base fanboy, it hurts to say this, but I would put him in mid tier.
Yeah, I think C is exactly the right spot because like there are some uses But yeah, you just look at those other Gregar options that just trump him, and the fact that he can't like the whiffing on holes, like that's horrible. That's and I would not have if you had asked me like 2 months ago, I would have been like, no way, there's no way holes stop base. Like the hell's rolling makes sense because that rolls on the ground. Like you can understand that, which I guess is ironic because here we go, we got blue arms, base Anomaly or Forte another. Now he's 160, but he's a crazy multi-hitting scenario. And I know that there's a placement where he can hit like 8 times or something. I don't know if it's right in front of you or if it's at like the very end.
It's directly in front of you. The sword.
Directly in front of you. He's going to hit for an obscene amount of times. But yeah, there are some downsides, and let's talk about them. Soul, what are your thoughts on base Anomaly?
Now, once again, this chip has the downside of holes. However, unlike base, the default base Anomaly loses to basically all kinds of holes. So what I mean by that is get into battle chip, right? So right. If you use base, the normal base, right? Red hands base, and your opponent TFCs with get on, well, the panel that they're standing on will always still be a whole panel. It'll be cracked, but it'll be a panel that can take the damage. So Geddon does not beat that chip in a TFC. But versus base Anomaly, Geddon will defeat that in a TFC because you try to make the discs and it doesn't go over the holes. Unfortunately, they'll just disappear. Right?
Yeah. However, so when you can react in that way, when they can just throw out that Geddon that way, that's pretty rough. But however, let's hear it.
However, base is 10 times better than the normal one because you have to stand in the center row or your centermost column, right? Well, no, the center row, in order for all 4 hits to connect. But if there's nothing stopping, if there's no holes at all, and your opponent doesn't have the defense, obviously, then they will take all 4 discs, which is 160 a pop. Now, what makes this scary is after a double point, this is doing 210 damage per disc. So this actually beats Life Aura. So you can't even safely TFC Life Aura to this chip. This chip is very underrated.
Interesting. Now I see a Mosca in chat who's saying that I guess you and the opponent have to be exactly on top of each other to get like a crazy amount of hits. Which I guess is extremely rare. That's like, I don't even know how that happens. Like a step sword. I don't know how you actually can pull off literally on top of each other. Pretty rare. And he's saying that Geddon doesn't crack the panel under you, which doesn't block the base. But I think, like, all things considered, it's pretty powerful. But, like, once again, I just feel like base Anomaly, it's just got this syndrome where it's like the other options are so good for Falzar. Like,
Well, it's competing with Meteor Knuckle, right? For the main, like, Falzar Giga, right? If you're playing Hub.Batch, that means your build is very specific. And you're covering your bases with Hub.Batch usually. But the reason why Meteor Knuckle is so coveted over base is only because of that chance to hit a slash cross for double damage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, Meteor Knuckle is not that much DPS. Sometimes you don't have the field's positioning for Meteor Knuckle to go off. Sometimes your opponent isn't slash cross, right?
True.
But with base Anomaly, as long as the field is the way it needs to be, it's always dealing that 640 plus damage, right?
Yeah.
So it's actually a severely underrated chip. There was actually a tournament a while ago that Salad had ran, and she was running base Anomaly over Meteor Knuckle, and she was wrecking people because people really underestimate the damage that chip does.
Yeah.
So honestly,
now the positioning can be awkward too, though, right? I feel like is it like
slightly?
Yeah, because like I feel like you need to be like, do you need to be in the middle row for the max hits, or
you have to be in the middle row because if you stand on the top or bottommost rows, the disc will fall off the screen. But you still get the 2 hits, right? So both hits hitting for 160 is still solid damage.
Gotcha. Okay, well then, where would you place it overall?
Honestly, I would place it in A tier.
Really? A tier?
I'm so serious.
Wow. Okay, because I would put it in like low B maybe, or like high C. Really? Even with the downside, you would still put it in A?
the downsides aren't really that crazy. I mean, Kernel Force also just loses to holes if you really think about it, but it's an amazing chip, right?
True.
It's very easy to play around a Kernel Force, but hey, you know, it loses to the same things that base Anomaly would, right? It doesn't do double damage, sure, but it's a solid 600 damage on one chip. That chip good.
Wow. Okay. Well, can I... A just feels really high. But like, I see what you're saying. Like, can we split it B and maybe revisit base after we do the Gigas? Can we revisit it maybe?
Sure. Okay, we'll split that B.
Just for now, because I could totally be persuaded. I could absolutely be persuaded. And I'm seeing people in chat agree that they like A. Yeah, no. What do you imagine being an S? That's fair. I guess I'm just thinking like all the Gigas. Yeah, no. I mean, if you guys are thinking A, I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. I guess, and I'm gonna defer to you guys for sure because I am not nearly the expert in that regard. But okay. Well, I like it. Let's. How about we throw it in A for now, and then maybe I'll concede this fight. Then maybe after we see the Gigas, we can discuss like
as we talk about the other Gigas, you'll see why I placed it here.
Okay, that's fair. Now here we go. I'm just gonna let my own coloring, my own bias trickle through. We got Meteor Knuckle, which is an interesting chip.
Oh, that's not Meteor Knuckle. That's
I'm sorry, Giga. What's it called? Big Hook. I'm sorry, it's Big Hook. Yeah. Which that's my tone. I'm giving the Big Hook tone and not the Meteor Knuckle, not the Meteor Knuckle tone. Big Hook is a Gregar Giga chip. Deals 240 damage times 2 if they're right in the middle. But when I say middle, it's like a very specific column. It's like the way that the fists go down. I think their life sword range is they do one fist and then a second one. And if you're caught right, like if you imagine your starting zone in the right in that very center spot, like you're gonna hit twice. But yes, I think it's bad.
Yeah, unfortunately, so it has the same limitations as regular base, so that means you're gonna have to deal with like trying to get that sweet spot. It does 240 for one of the hits if you don't get this sweet spot, and it's limited to the 3x3 range. It is breaking damage, so it does have that going for that. So if you catch a slash cross, they're gonna take a ton of damage. But what makes it bad is that since it's locked to that 3x3 range, Slash Cross wants to be camping forward with area anyway. So you're never getting that. You're never getting that really spicy punishment. And I'm seeing a Mosca in chat saying if only we could area grab the hook, which amen to that, because it is locked in. Like there's no changing the placement of those two fists. Like he is swinging where he wants to swing, and you know where he's going to swing because he's not changing at all. I think it's pretty bad. Bad. I don't know if it's F bad, but it could be F bad. No, I think it's
C or F. Yeah, I mean, especially
the reason why it can't be on mid tier is because base.
You'll never run it.
Base multi hits, right? It has worth.
Yeah.
This hits twice, but you can't possibly kill or delete opponent at like 400-ish HP with a big hook.
Yeah,
they'll always trigger into undershirt.
Yeah, I think the reason I almost considered C was it's like, oh, it's a Giga chip. But then you stop and think what that Giga chip actually does. And it's like, okay, well, not only is the placement so awkward and not only is it really difficult to get like the full value, because even then the full value, 480, like that, you have to go through so many hoops to get 480 baseline, right?
Yeah.
And then you're giving up so many better Giga chips, right?
Yeah.
You're giving up so many better Giga chips. So yeah, I agree. I think it is a good F. All right, speaking of another spicy one, we've got Bug Rise Sword. All right, this is a Gregar Giga chip. This does change your charge attack into a Dark Sword. Now, it's not the Dark Mega / Dark Sword that you see in Battle Network 5, where it's a Life Orb. This is a 200 damage swing, which does cause flashing. It's, decent range. It's Life Sword range. But yes, this is Bug Rise Sword. I do not love this chip, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this chip, Soul Express.
So this chip is actually really cool, and unlike Bug Death Thunder, your build literally has to dedicate more slots to justify running it, right? So you have to be playing panel grabs, you have to be playing area grabs, you have to make sure you have the area control, right? BDT doesn't necessarily need all of that to function, but it's nice, right?
Right.
Like you
need it.
Right. So unfortunately, I feel like Bug Riser Sword, does hit that C slot. I definitely don't think it's any worse than Big Hook. I think Big Hook is actually the worst Giga in the game.
I agree. I would agree with that. And I think, like, so here's an interesting thing, right? Like, Gregar loves attack max, right? Like, that's like a very solid, like, you know, Gregar strategy. In that attack max world, Slash Cross is not that different than Bug Rise Sword. You know, like that's what I think, like that's the really awkward thing. So I guess like if you wanted to run Bug Rise Sword, you'd be doing like a no attack Gregar, like you would really be trying to use that.
Because Slash is dealing 160 and is your alt win con. So like if you lose Slash, you still have this, right? If you don't find this, you have Slash Cross. So you can always be applying pressure.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like if you're running attack max already and you're running this chip, it's like, you know, it's like you're going all in on something that flashes the opponents. You're going I'm saying obviously you have to go up, but I'm saying like unlike Bug Death Thunder where you're going all in but you're paralyzing, you know, you're setting up chips, your bubbles are doing double damage. You know, you don't have, they can track you and just be annoying. Yeah. You're going all in on something that your Slash Cross like already kind of does. And then, like, you know, you're flashing, the charge isn't that much faster. I think C is fine. I really do not like that chip that much. But I think there's a world where you could run it kind of in an interesting way. But, yeah.
I mean, it's a weird... won a tournament with Bug Riser Sword.
Really? And what was the supporting build? What was the... I'm so curious.
It was just Gregar good stuff. I mean, Gregar already has amazing charge shots. And then you throw this in the mix and your opponent doesn't know how to deal with all of it, right? It was really solid.
That's cool. I think a C chip can do that. Obviously, an F chip is never going to do that. But yeah, I don't. It's hard because it's like you're giving up. Yeah, you have to really build around it, and I guess you can win if you do. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a. At the end of the day, I think C is exactly the spot for Bug Rise Sword. All right, now we got Bug Death Thunder. I'm pretty biased for this chip, but once again, let's be real objective here and break it down. This is a Falzar Giga chip. At the cost of a Bug Frag, every time you use a charge shot, you spit out a Dark Thunder. It deals 200 damage, which is enough to break a life aura without holy panels underneath it. It tracks the opponent for a decent chunk of time. I don't know the length off the top of my head, but it's a decent chunk. And while one thunder is going, you can charge up a second one, which is, you know, fun and obnoxious and whatever. It does paralyze, so you can follow up with other attacks. Yeah, I think I pretty much covered it. What's your thought on BDT?
So, BDT is, I hate to say it, but it's a new player trap. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of people see the effects of BDT and how good it can be because some people do not understand how to deal with it, right?
And there are a lot of ways to deal with it, and that's actually worth noting because like a lot of newer players equally come to me and they're like, "How do you beat this thing? It's oppressive." You know, or actually, and once again, not to totally derail the conversation, a lot of people have come to me and been like, "We should ban Bug Death Thunder," and it's like, no, no, and it's like, right, and it's like I see why you're frustrated. You know, this is a play style that is very different than like baseline good stuff chips in your folder. It's a very different, you know, kind of strategy. But believe me, as someone who likes to play it myself, it is far from unbeatable. It is not at all this like oppressive, you know, juggernaut of a chip. And there are a lot of ways to beat it. In fact, maybe you want to share a few of them with us.
Of course, both versions have a cross that can invalidate the balls, right? You have charge cross and ground cross. With their charge shots, they can deny getting hit. You can have hub, which gives you shield. You can play shield in your default Navi cust. You can properly time your invises. Use your defensive abilities properly. You know, play around it like that. But one thing that people don't know or know how to necessarily take advantage of is this what was the word for it?
Mix-ups? What? What are you talking about?
It's there's a brief period where when you release the Thunderball from the
yeah, you can't use a chip, right? It's a lockout, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Lockout. It's chip. Yeah. You experience chip lockout. And now that is extremely important because during that few frames of movement that they have, they can't move, they can't respond, they can do nothing except release the Thunderball. And during that time is when you punish. That is your opportunity to just dumpster them with whatever you have set up. Erase man into infinite. And once you understand that chip lockout is a thing, you will notice how you time your things a lot differently, right? What happens is a lot of players don't understand that you can play defensively and aggressively at almost any moment based on what the BDT player has to do a lot of work, honestly, to make sure that everything lines up the way they want it. It's a control.
Yeah.
They're playing control. And you have to understand how to play against control. That's
a great way to put it too, because you think about when we say control, folks, we're talking about it card games, right? There's a lot of strategies in card games and various other games where you're trying to sit around, right? And you have a win con, you have a very powerful win con that's going to sort of push you the distance. And in this case, BDT is cool because, you're sort of building your damage output is your charge shot. And therefore you can jam in more support chips. You could jam in, more whatevers, right? You don't have to be as offensive with your setup, right? That's more of a control strategy. And I can tell you too, the chip lockout's real. That's happened to me before where I had to get it in hand. And as soon as I, spit out the thunder, the Chrono Force comes and I curse myself. I'm like, why did I let this happen to me? No, it's a real thing. And there are a lot of ways to deal with it. I've seen a lot of people in chat talking about it. Your shield Navi Cust, right? Which you can get from Hub.Batch even without, using it in your Navi customizer. Your charge tackle.
Anti-magic NCP too.
Yep. Charge tackle, invincibility frames as you move through it. Ground beast. You can penetrate through it through your drill action. You can dig underground as ground cross, and hopefully it'll leave the stage. There's a lot of ways around it. And something else Yamaska said in chat, which I fully agree with, you can just you can just apply the pressure to them. Because I can tell you, as a BDT player, I'm my moves are telegraphed, right? It's enter dust cross, full crust, dig, right? It's in that time, there's so many windows of opportunity for disruption, for a lot of damage, for just a really awkward position. It is not ban worthy. I can see why new players who are unused to it might feel like that. There are a lot of ways around it. That being said, I would like to propose A tier. Okay, and I think right because even with the weaknesses, it's a really cool build. We've seen in patch cards with Planet Man, you can really take those advantages and run to the moon with it. Yeah, so I think overall, I saw some people in chat talk about S tier. Don't think it's there, but I think a high A, definitely I would put it over base Anomaly personally. And yeah, I think it's a solid, and you know what, and it's worthy of that spot just because it's a whole archetype, which is not, you can't really say that about a lot of other chips. It's an entire, format in itself, which is cool. So
exactly.
Anyway, all right, cool. Next Giga chip we got here is Chrono Force. I believe, right? This is, Chrono Force, unless that's Cross Divide. No, that's Cross Divide. We got Chrono Force, okay? Chrono Force is a Gregar Giga chip. For every row of area that you have, a soldier is going to come out, spit out its gun for 3 shots, so 30 damage baseline, but it'll shoot 3 times. All of those shots paralyze the opponents, which means that if one of them paralyzes you, the rest of the soldiers are definitely going to hit. It can be disrupted by holes. It can be disrupted by taking the area back. Obviously, auras and invis and things can move around it. But I will say Chrono Force is really interesting in that it is the only Giga chip that doesn't freeze time. It's the only real action one. So if you are in Beast Out mode, because it's a neutral chip, it will deal an extra 30. If you are in Beast Over, it will double, which, doesn't always matter. But if you buff it with an attack 30, then it matters. And yeah, it's altogether a very powerful chip. What's your take?
I mean, it's not even really a take, to be honest with you. People complain about BDT, people complain about Meteor Knuckles, but 97% of every Gregar folder you see is running Kernel Force, and that's for a damn reason. You know what I'm saying? That is the best Giga in that game.
I was about to say I think even just strongest chip. Yeah, it's got a very, very
it's oppressive.
Solid case for it.
It centralizes the meta. It's Landeristarian, bro. It's Landeristarian. You have to have answers for this card in your folder in some case, in some shape or form, somewhere.
Yep. Whether it's your Geddon, whether it's your clever Magnum placements, whether it's whatever. Because it's tough. Because I would say what almost makes Chrono Force over the top is how easy it is to pair with your Wind Racks and your Gundel Souls to clear out the defensive tools.
You really have to play out of your mind to play around that entire scenario. Like
Yeah.
But a lot of people see the counterplay and then be like, "Oh man, Carnival's didn't do anything," and it's like, "Yeah, I'm glad because honestly,
I'm dead." Because the difference between it hitting and not hitting is basically life and death, right? So yeah, no, the swing is massive. Yeah, no, I'm glad we agree. Easy S tier, extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. And honestly, you look at the other Gregar options, and they're just not even as it's hard. It's hard to, if the other options were interesting, maybe you wouldn't see the Chrono Force degree, like maybe. But even then, it's just such a powerful chip. It's just so good. All right, next up we got the other kernel, which is Cross Divide. This is a Falzar Giga chip. It is a big X. If you are like directly in line of sight with the opponents, they're going to get hit with the middle of the X, which is double damage for 500. Otherwise, I believe Chrono Force is almost always going to hit you with a tip for 250. Maybe there are placements where it misses completely. I'm not actually too sure about that, but it is sword damage, right? So you can hit a Tengu for a lot. What's our take on Cross Divide?
Now, Cross Divide is an interesting chip because you kind of overlook it. It does 500 if you hit in the center of the X. It hits twice. And you might say, okay, well, so does Big Hook, right? But the thing is, you always get damage out of this if you line it up properly, Like, it doesn't matter how close your opponent is to you, you can still hit them if they're directly in your line of sight with that X pattern. So there's never, like, a chance for you to just completely, like, lose out on damage from this chip. I mean, if you're not in the same row, I don't think the corners actually do seek out. I think it always tries to aim in the center. But, yeah, I feel like this chip is pretty good. If you hit Tengu Cross with it, that's ×2. That's up to 1k damage. There's a clip about that, I think, with me in it, casting over that moment. And when you get hit by it in Tengu, you get eviscerated. I'm not going to say I don't even think it's as good as Base Anomaly, because it only maxes out at the 500, and Base Anomaly can always deal the 600. Right. It doesn't lose to holes like Base Anomaly, but, I mean, having answer versus not having answer, like, okay, you had the defense. Like, I can't be mad at that. That doesn't make this any better than Base Anomaly, in my opinion. But I don't think it's nearly as bad as Base or normal Base, rather, or Bug Riser Sword. So I think this would be
if you're thinking a solid B, I agree with that. I think it's a B. And exactly, right? We look at the definition, situationally good, right? Against the Tengu, amazing. Pretty accurate for the most part. Imaska is saying that I guess if you're not lined up, the X is centered 3 squares away. So maybe it's not actually guaranteed to hit 250 if you don't. But I don't. Maybe in practice it's still pretty accurate. But yeah, I think Cross Divided B. That seems pretty reasonable to me. All right, next up we've got I believe that's Delta Ray. Delta Ray, wow, 260 baseline. Interesting. So Delta Ray is a Gregar Giga chip. It is a sword attack. It's Proto Man's signature move. You see it in a lot of attacks and games. If you are in the right placements, he will hit you in a triangle formation, a delta shape. Now, it is very placement dependent, right? Because sometimes Delta Ray will hit, once or twice. You have to be in the center row for it to hit all 3 times. And it can actually deal no hits if your opponent is in the right spot. If they're on the corner, right? The topmost row. I think the bottom row, they'll still get 1 hit. But I think if they're at the topmost row, they will get no hits. What do you think about Delta Ray?
Honestly, with all its demerits, it's really easy to predict when this chip specifically is coming. I don't think it's as good as Cross Divide, unfortunately, because I feel like Cross Divide just does more. But the damage output, if you get the sweet spot, is huge, right? If you're able to set that up, it's huge. But I also, on the same merit, think that if you can set a base, just normal base, it can be pretty huge, right? Like, I play that chip almost exclusively in my F-code folder, and I still don't think Delta Ray Edge is any better. It loses to the same things, if not worse, because Geddon beats it, of course. And
can't
honestly,
and the fact that you can whiff completely is pretty crazy. Like, and that's not even like with holes and stuff. Like the top row, they're just not going to get any hits.
Yeah. So honestly, I think it's in C tier. I feel like I think I would put it on the bottom of C tier. Like, I really don't think it's better than those other two chips. And I don't think it's necessarily better than Cross Divide.
I would agree. And once again, I think in this Gregar world, you know, it's really, really hard to say no to Kernel Force and or Gregar Giga chip. You have to have a really good reason, I think. Now, I could see a world, because I see Julian in chat talking about, in fact, I see a lot of folks who want B for it. You know, I do see a lot of folks clamoring for B, which I think is pretty interesting because, you know, it can deal amazing damage and it can definitely be pretty cool, but I don't know.
Actually, hold on. Seeing what Julian said, he says in Twitch chat, C for standard, B for patch cards. And I actually very much agree with that. If we weren't doing this for standard, I think in a B tier setting, the viability of this chip shoots right up because the threatening oppression that Gregar has to be able to scare you out of that top row is much higher, especially with the patch card shard shots. And also, the ability to just do a large amount of damage even though your opponent has status guard, because status guard does hinder Kernel Force a lot more, and it's so easy to make holes in that format.
So easy.
Planet Man. Yeah, I definitely think it rises up much higher into that B tier setting in a mod card format. But in standard, I think C is the proper placement.
Yeah. I think, yeah, and I think, yeah. I'm debating if we throw it in a low B, but I think C is probably fine. It's a tough. You look at what you give up, and it gets a little awkward. It can get a little awkward. But yeah, I think you guys have really good points with patch cards and holes. That's a super fair point. Next up, we've got Hub.Batch. Hub.Batch is a Falzar Giga chip. It is a lot of Navi customizer programs in one. It is Buster Max. It's, you know, Attack Max, Speed Max, Charge Max, Shield, Custom 3, undershirts for whatever reason, and I think I'm missing one too. I think there's something else I'm missing, but I can't think of it. Maybe that's it. A lot of chips. Oh, and air shoes and float shoes, right? Your Omni shoes.
Yeah.
A lot of programs in one chip, and in J code, which you know, unlike these other chips, I feel like J code is like a more viable code. I mean, I guess Q is not bad. More splashable for sure. Way more splashable, yeah. Because even Kernel Force, like, Q gives it the exact tools that it needs with Gundel Soul and Grab Revenge. But yeah, I think J in general is pretty strong. All right, what do we think about Hub.Batch?
Yeah, honestly, it does too much to not be an S.
Agreed.
It does way too much to not be an S. It gives you everything,
He's
dude.
agreed.
Even after you get uninstalled, it gives you everything and a little bit more back. I mean, obviously, if it had super armor attached to it too, it'd just be busted in the game.
It would be absolutely busted, yeah. And it's still extremely good. And I think, and this is such a great point for newer players, right? Because I think it's really easy to look at a chip and say, that doesn't deal damage, you know, why would I play this chip that doesn't deal damage? And, you know, just overlooking the sheer utility that you get out of it. And the fact that your Navi customizer, you can, like in Falzar, you can afford to not put any of, you know, Buster stats in it. You know, we've seen some really cool Navi customizers. I don't necessarily, you know, prescribe it, but we've seen some extremely cool Navi customizers where it's like, you know what? Like, I'm going to run no custom or very limited custom. Like, I'm going to run no Buster stats. I'm going to squeeze in all the zoo, you know, pieces. You know, and like, well, let's just like get the most value out of this chip as possible. And even without that, right? Even without squeezing every little inch of value out of Hub.Batch, it is still just a very good chip. Just a very good chip. So, yeah. All right, cool. All right, so I think easy S tier. I agree with that. I like it. Next up, we've got ourselves Meteor Knuckle. Meteor Knuckle is another Falzar chip. Meteor Knuckle is breaking damage. It is basically never going to miss, as far as I'm concerned. I believe that it actually just can't miss unless they have an invis or an anti-damage. It's always going to home in on the Mega Man position, the opponent's position, and then all the pieces around it, all the sort of surrounding panels around it, have a chance to get hit. It gets divvied up, I think, equally amongst all the other spots. Now, the interesting thing about Meteor Knuckles is because of the positioning, because it locks in on Mega Man or the opponents. If they're in the corner where there's only 4 possible panels, right? If you know, Mega Man and then the 3 that surround him, or heaven forbid, they're like, you know, row locked in certain spots. You can hit a ton of times, up to 8 times, I think, is the actual max. And then it also cracks panels too. So even if you don't deal that much damage at the end of the day, you still get some value. What's your take on Meteor Knuckle?
As you just said, you get value no matter what when you use this chip, and the fact that you can set it up in the first place to deal 800 is already amazing. If you can catch a slash cross, even if 2 hits hit, that's still 400 damage, because it usually always gets the 2 hits at minimum. Yeah. And then you break panels so you can trap it. It literally does everything that you need it to do. Honestly, that's an A tier battle chip to me.
Now, I do see some people in chat talking about S tier. And I'm wondering what do you think the difference between A and S in this position is? Because I'm on the fence myself. I love Meteor Knuckles. I love that it basically doesn't miss. It's basically always going to do something, whether it's cracking panels or dealing some amount of damage. You're right that it, I know we talked about this earlier. There's a chance it's like 2 hits or 3 hits, and in that case, the damage isn't that much. But there are worlds that aren't that hard to pull off where you can squeeze some massive value. What's our take?
The reason why I personally would put it in A tier as opposed to S tier is because unlike the other chips, it's TFCable. Like unlike Kernel Force, it's TFCable, right?
Yeah, or even like Hub.Batch, right? You can't interact with that, yeah.
Right. Like, yeah, Hub.Batch you can interact with in the form of
uninstall.
If they use it, uninstall, of course. But if they use Hub.Batch, you can just respond to it with whatever you want, and they won't respond to that because they want their Hub.Batch value, right? So that is the interesting counterplay to it. It's kind of like bug fix. If I use bug fix, I'm not going to throw away my bug fix and try and defend myself if it means I get my bug fix, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah,
with Meteor Knuckle, they can TFC with it. They can play aggressively with their own area control. There's a lot of ways to play around it. I mean, there's a lot of ways to play around Kernel Force too, but the big difference to me is
you're gonna die.
Yeah, you're like 100% dead. The only way you're 100% dead from Meteor Knuckle is if you're player 0 and you play
slash cross.
And no, not even. I'm just being mean. But if you put your opponent into the back row and you catch them in the corner and they get the 8 hits, right? If you can get the 8 hits off of it for 800, yeah, obviously that's really good. But think about that, right? Think about that exact situation. You had to area grab 2 times and beat in Tengu and like make sure they didn't have defense in order to go ahead and do that damage, right?
Yeah.
But with Kernel Force, even with the neutral area, you can literally do 1k plus worth of damage with neutral area. Like, you have to do so much more to deny the Kernel Force in order to like survive. But Meteor Knuckle, a single TFC just kind of ruins that chip.
No,
I mean, it does a lot of other stuff too, but
I don't know that I needed convincing, but you totally sold me. I think a very high A though. I would actually even put it over. I might even put it over BDT. I don't know that the order matters that much, but I think just BDT, a very. What's that?
I'm sorry. I think
no, you're good.
And Meteor Knuckle are kind of on the same plane. I definitely think they're both better than base Anomaly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay, well then that is going to be all. Whoa, that's going to be all of our Giga chips. Now, hear me out, okay? 3 A's, 1 B. I mean, look at that right there, man. I'm telling you, you know what I mean? It's like it could be right there. But if you really do want to stick with A for Forte for your boy base, I could totally live with it. I think this is a really solid list, and I think this list is just straight up like confirmed more or less by like tournament results. You know, I think for the most part, like
I would like to point out as a small PSA, right? Notice that in the top 5 battle chips, 4 of them are Falzar, right?
For sure.
And it always sparks the debate, or it always like leads people to say, what's the better version? Is it Falzar or is it Gregar? You can't look at it that way, right? Yes, okay, it makes sense that you would think Falzar is the better version simply because it has better gigas, right? But what really comes down to it is how you use those chips, right? How you play. Like, imagine if Gregar had Hub.Batch, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
that
disgusting.
Would be so, like, okay, yeah, they can't dig for it because they don't have dust. Dust being in your folder is what makes a lot of these Falzar Gigas very desirable as well because you have access to going through your folder. Gregar doesn't. However, imagine taking off air shoes and whatever value from Gregar, but he can get it back. And on top of that, his crosses are always dealing a ton of damage. Like, the Falzar crosses Their charge shots are great. Don't get me wrong, but they don't deal nearly as much damage as Gregar's can consistently. Like, you have 3 crosses that are basically line nukes. He cross forces you to be in the front row, right? Well, excuse me, 4 crosses are basically line nukes. Because charge cross, if you're both in front row, you can also hit down that entire column. Absolutely. And then you have slash cross. Like, those crosses deal a lot of damage, and they just put pressure immediately just by going into a cross. Falzar doesn't have that. Falzar has to use their chips and their strategy in order to go ahead and try to get that DPS, which is solid, but it's a different playstyle is what I'm really getting at, right?
Yeah, and I think when you really consider, like, the quality, too, like, of course, I'm not going to tell you these are, you know, poor quality chips, but Kernel Force, I think, like, just the best chip in the game, and, like, not hard to pull off, and kind of hard to disrupt. So, like, even if you know, I would take one Kernel Force over, like, you know, those other 3 or other 4, you know, it's like, there's an interesting, like, balancing act there, which I think it goes beyond just strictly, like, parallel how many, like, it's not a matter of quantity, it's a matter of quality as well. And even just, as you said, like, kind of, like, feeding into the strategies, too, because, like, when they're paralyzed, that Gregar Beastbuster is, like, exactly what you want, right? You want to be mowing them down, you know, with it, so it's like a supporting package that I think kind of all comes together, which is super, super good.
Personally, the only difference I would have actually loved to see in Gigas between both versions is the swapping of the base versions, right? Because if base Anomaly was in Gregar, then you could really have a nice little argument of, okay, I don't really want to just play Kernel Force, I'll play base Anomaly, and I'll still get the 600 damage value, but it's a little difference, a bit of a mix-up, right?
Yeah.
And then base in Falzar, well, you do all your dust digging anyway, so you're going to find your double point, you're going to find your attack plus 30, and you can make that setup happen. And you have Tengu Cross too, so I can push you back. And I would have loved to see those 2 chips swapped, and that would have been really
That's
nice.
probably the best swap. Yeah, you're right. That's probably the best swap. Yeah, because it's like, I think for me, the fact that I've been kind of down on base Anomaly is I feel like...
It's because Kernel Force.
Yeah. It's like this, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, then that's solid. I guess as a bonus, do you want to tackle these bosses in a patch card world?
Do you want me to shorthand that, or do you want to go through both individually?
We could shorthand it. They're pretty similar. I mean, obviously Gregar is better, you know, in terms of like cracking panels and things, but you know, they both do a big spicy animation. They hit for, you know, some residual damage, and they do like a breath attack.
I need you to do me a favor then quickly, Demi, all right?
Let's hear it.
So in the top right corner, there's a gear, right? I want you to click that gear.
Oh god, you want S plus?
All right, and we're gonna put a plus next to that S. Right? And then you're gonna hit enter and add the row to the top. Right?
I like it.
And then we're gonna put both of those in there.
Love it.
Because honestly, arguing any other slot for these chips is crazy to me.
Agreed. Yeah, and they're both like, unless you have the invis or the anti-damage, you are basically not disrupting you can dodge their breath, right? Sure. But they do so much in general between, you know, Gregar cracking those panels, destroying obstacles, like, you know, it's obnoxious, right? And we're glad that we don't see them. We're glad in our regular happy little bubble of baseline BN6. We're glad they're not there, because they are the definition of oppressive, of way too much.
There's one more Giga chip that we didn't talk about. If we're talking about,
we're doing Double Beast.
We're gonna put Double Beast right on up there. Like, yeah, you might as well go ahead and get that Giga.
So just to be clear to the audience in chat who's not familiar, this is a mega chip, Double Beast. It is a secret mega chip you download from the game. 480, basically unavoidable damage, right?
420,
Holes don't stop them. 420, you're right. I'm so sorry. Basically unavoidable damage. You know, it's multi-hitting. You can't use attack ups on it. You can't use, in fact, you can't even full sync it for any modifiers. But it is basically utterly unavoidable damage. Very, very good. And yeah, honestly, it may as well be above these other Giga chips, because it is extremely powerful.
In Twitch chat, Zero Solaris asks, I'm assuming these are tourney banned chips at S+. Well, in standard play, international standard play, yes, they are not playable. But if you're playing senior class or master class format, they are very much legal, which is why we don't like seniors very much.
Yeah, I agree. You want to talk about over-centralized stuff. It's like,
you have to play these chips. You
Right.
have to, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they're bad, because in Masterclass, again, we're competing with things like chip recovery and tons of healing and all kinds of nonsense, right? So, yeah that's kind of warranted.
It's actually funny because even in this S plus tier, having seen so many patch card battles and practice it so much, like in this exact format, I wouldn't even say that Gregar and Falzar are the most busted things you can do, which is actually hysterical because they're so powerful and so dumb. But when you're talking about a field of, chip recovery 40, 10 power busters, freezing opponents, it's like, it's hard to look at these guys and say, you're the culprit. And it's like, well, actually, they're the reason you can actually kill someone when you've got, 1200 HP getting residually recovered over the course of a game. So, yeah, it's some tough stuff. Super Saiyan can't get behind Falzar X and S+. I don't know, gang. I don't know. I mean, obviously Gregar is better than Falzar. No one's going to deny that. But I still think I don't know.
If you're gonna sit here and tell me Falzar is not better than every other one of those Giga chips, you're wilding to me. I literally can't. Like, I don't think Kernel Force in mod card format is better than Falzar. I don't.
Yeah,
Hub.Batch is really good, but maybe Hub.Batch goes to S+ tier as well. But I don't know.
Yeah, that's tough. And obviously, this is in the patch card format, right? Because I think Hub.Batch is even stronger in patch cards than he is normally, right? You get so much, like you're like, I guess the abilities that you gain are so much more valuable when like you want to spend your patch cards on other stuff. So yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I would agree with this though. I wouldn't. We could split hairs, with Falzar and things like that, but I think overall it's a respectable list. I'm pretty pleased with it. Okay, do we want to hit megas? Because I'm not sure if the YouTube if the matches got uploaded. I'm not positive if they did, but maybe they did. For patch cards, Hub is S++. You have to play it. Yeah, patch cards Hub is insane for sure.
Yeah,
patch card Hubs is insane, and like you're running numbers, right? Like you're almost always running numbers, so you're kind of going for it. All right, so maybe let's hit the megas then.